Hello and welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic. In today's video, we are going to update and upgrade our 5-color Legendary Humans EDH deck. Thank you for choosing MTG Burgeoning for your Magic the Gathering content. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and consider becoming a subscriber. Doing so supports the channel and makes you eligible for our various subscriber rewards series. If you would like to support the channel further, then click the link to our Patreon page in the description below. There you can join our ongoing Pack Wars series as a 1-month supporter or ongoing member. Or try joining Pack Wars for free by commenting on every MTG Burgeoning video in a month. We strive to offer creative rewards through our various Patreon tiers. So if Pack Wars isn't for you, then something else will be. Links to our content and various subscriber rewards series can be found in the description below. Send us an email, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. We are your channel for all things Magic. What's up, MTG BC, baby? You are the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another installment of the Up and Up series. And today we are going to update and upgrade our 5-color Legendary Humans EDH deck. A deck which currently is piloted by Esika, God of the Tree, and the Prismatic Bridge. So let's start off right at the top with Joda the Unifier. Here we have a Legendary Human Wizard for 5/5 and Wooburg colors. Legendary creatures we control get +X/+X, where X is the number of legendary creatures we control. And yes, this ability will affect Joda. Notice the text does not say other legendary creatures. So Joda's coming down as a 6/6 because it's getting +1/+1 from his own ability. Whenever we cast a legendary spell from our hand, we exile cards from the top of our library until we exile a legendary non-land card with lesser mana value. We may cast that card without paying its mana cost, and then we put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. So Joda comes down with a much more personalized and powerful version of Coat of Arms, as long as we're running Legendary Tribal, and he also has a somewhat restricted, but again, one that can be taken advantage of, Cascade ability, all on a Legendary Human body with all 5 colors. I hope you can see that all signs are pointing for Joda the Unifier to displace Esika, God of the Tree, as the general of this EDH deck. And that's exactly what's going to happen. Joda is in, and Esika is out. Next card going in, it is Dihada, Binder of Wills. We're going to throw a Planeswalker into the mix here because it synergizes so well with our Legendary Human theme. Not so much with humans as it does with Legendary, but we do, and we have, and we will continue to do so. We're going to continue to make this Legendary Human build more about the Legendary Humans and less about the solitary Legendary synergies. Now, yes, they are going to be included in the deck, but this is not going to be a deck that just filters in every single possible legendary card. It needs to be a Legendary Human in order to gain entry into this deck, and it needs to make sense for including it by a way in which of helping out the team of other Legendary Humans. So let's take a look at what Dihada does. She ETBs with 5 loyalty counters. We can +2 her to put up to 1 to choose up to 1 target legendary creature, and it gains Vigilance, Lifelink, and Indestructible until our next turn. So that's a great way to protect ourselves and to protect Dihada, especially if one of those humans has reach or can fly, as a way in which to deter all potential attackers. We can -3 Dihada to reveal the top 4 cards of our library, and we may put any number of legendary cards from among them into our hand and the rest into our graveyard. We create a treasure token for each card put into our graveyard this way. So this ability is unreal. So even if we whiff, even if we reveal 4 non-legendary cards and they all go to the graveyard, Dihada gives us 4 treasure tokens. That ability is ridiculous. ridiculously powerful. And lastly, we can -11 Dahada to gain control of all non-land permanents until end of turn. We untap them and they gain haste, which if we reach that point, it hopefully will be a win. Dahada is going to synergize this legendary theme immensely. It's going to help with protection. It's going to help with offensive and defensive characteristics with her +2 ability. It's going to allow us to get cards into our hand and or mana acceleration in the form of treasure tokens. Dahada is in, and it is knocking out Sanctuary Lockdown. It came down as an enchantment. It acted as a human anthem, giving our dudes +1/+1. And we can pay 2 generic mana and tap 2 untapped humans we control to tap target creature an opponent controls. This is not a human token deck. This human deck is all about the legends, so we really don't want to be tapping down our humans just to tap down a creature an opponent controls. Let's instead get rid of Sanctuary Lockdown, add 1 more mana to its overall mana value, and replace it with a much more powerful Dahada. Next card going in, it is Shanid, Sleeper Scourge, a 2/4 legendary human knight with Menace for 1 in Mardu colors. Other legendary creatures we control have Menace as well. Fantastic ability to spread around the team, making each one of our humans a menacing threat, no pun intended, or a pun intended, both of which are just fine. Whenever we play a legendary land or cast a legendary spell, we draw a card and we lose 1 life. Imagine having Jodah the Unifier on our side of the battlefield and Shannon at the same time, and we're casting our legendary humans, we're drawing cards, we're cascading into other legendary humans. Oh, it's just going to be fantastic synergy. Shannon's ability to provide mass evasion to our squad is one of the biggest reasons why he's coming into the deck and replacing Cheville, Bane of Monsters. A 1/3, this legendary human rogue does have Death Touch, and it's only a green and a black. But, I mean, let's be honest, when we line up Cheville's ability versus Shannon's ability, it just really doesn't match up. Cheville, at the beginning of our upkeep, if our opponents control no permanents with a bounty counter on them, we put a bounty counter on target creature or planeswalker one of them controls. And then whenever an opponent controls with a bounty counter on it dies, we gain 3 life and we draw a card. All we have to do to draw a card with Shannon is just cast a legendary spell or play a legendary land. Plus, Cheville does nothing to help out the team. It's more about himself. Cheville out, Shannon in. All right, we have another new legendary human going in, and that's going to be Kyler Sigardian Emissary. 2/2 human cleric, 3 in Selesnya colors. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under our control, we'll put a +1/+1 counter on Kyler. Other humans we control get +1/+1 for each counter on Kyler. So again, the synergy is there. The deck is built around legendary humans. Humans are going to trigger Kyler, and humans are going to be the direct beneficiary of Kyler's massively inflated Anthem ability. Each +1/+1 counter on Kyler is going to make each one of our humans +1/+1. Kyler's coming in and is going to replace Yasova Dragonclaw. Some of the features that made Cheville an easy target for replacement also apply to Yasova. Yasova is pretty sweet in and of itself. I mean, a trampling 4/2 that can gank another creature an opponent controls during combat, that is pretty sweet. But for the purposes of synergizing and enhancing what this legendary human deck is trying to do, it does nothing to help out the team. It does nothing to do with any of our legendary synergies or any of our human synergies. If we're really doubling down to make this a legendary human deck, then we want to make sure that each legendary human that's included is going to do something to help out the overall squad. And let's face it, Kyler does that so much better than Yasova. All right, stepping away from our legendary creatures, just the creature aspect, we're going to include Relic of Legends. It's an artifact for 3. It taps to add 1 mana of any color, but we can also tap an untapped legendary creature we control to add 1 mana of any color. So if we really have a board just populated with our legendary humans, we have such mana resources available to us that it should not be a problem at all getting Jodah onto our side of the battlefield, and hopefully shortly thereafter winning the game through a mass combat turn. So Relic of Legends, Relic of Legends is going in, and it's going to replace Icon of Ancestry, same mana value of 3, and this is something that would synergize with our humans. It comes into play, we would name human. It gives our humans +1/+1, and it also allows us to pay 3, tap it, to look at the top 3 cards of our library, and if there's a human there, we get to put it into our hand and then put the rest in the bottom of our library in a random order. I just felt like from an overall standpoint, having more mana accessibility would be much stronger to the deck than having an Anthem and a maybe getting a card into our hand effect that Icon of Ancestry provides. So we're going to keep an eye on that just to make sure that we're not overall weakening our ability to participate in combat. Because remember, even though we're losing this Anthem effect of +1/+1, we're gaining the massive Anthem effect of Jodah that's just going to be sitting in the command zone. All right, next card going in is a class. It is Bard class. For Gruul colors, legendary creatures we control enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on them. So already we found a way in which to mitigate the loss of Icon of Ancestry in addition to having Jodah in the command zone. And once we lose the Icon of Ancestry, we also lose its Anthem effect. If we were to lose Bard class, the +1/+1 counters on those creatures will remain. We can move to level 2 by paying Gruul colors once again, and legendary spells we cast cost red-green less to cast. This effect only reduces the amount of colored mana we pay. At a bare minimum, this will always make the Gruul parts of Jodah free for us to cast. Can you imagine turn 1, Bard class goes into play, turn 3, we cast Jodah? That could very well happen in this deck. And the last level, to level up to 3, we pay 3 in Gruul colors, and whenever we cast a legendary spell, we exile the top 2 cards of our library, and we may play them this turn. With Bard class in play, with Shined in play, with Jodah in play, we are going to have access to so many cards in our hand and in exile, and from the top of our library through Jodah's Cascade ability, that it's only a matter of time until we overwhelm our opponents. Bard class is going in to replace Shared Summons. I love Shared Summons. Shared Summons is a great card when you're looking for some specific creatures, when you're trying to tutor up some biggins straight to your hand. It's instant speed, it's 3 and 2 green. We get any 2 creature cards with different names and put them right into our hand. The reason why we're making this swap is because Bard class does more for less mana. Now, maybe not less overall, because to get to level 3, we would have had to invest a total of 9 mana into the enchantment. But the Shared Summons is a one-time effect that brings 2 humans to our hand, whereas Bard class has overall legendary creature synergy, and that's just going to help out this build so much more. In addition to, if we get to level 3, each time we cast one of those legendary spells, we get 2 cards exiled, which is going to act as an extension of our hand, which means losing Shared Summons hurts even less. Next card going in, it is Swiftfoot Boots. Now, we're putting this in here as a way in which to protect Jodah. Now, we did not have any form of protection in the previous build when the commander was Esika, God of the Tree. That's because with that particular commander, we were never casting her as Esika. We were always casting her as the Prismatic Bridge, which came down as an enchantment. So we needed to know what we had. We did not need any additional protection because, let's face it, enchantments have lots more staying power on the battlefield than creatures do. Well, that's just not the case now. Now that Jodah is the general of this build, we got to find a way to protect him so that we can take advantage of his abilities. So Swiftfoot Boots is going in, and coming out is going to be Konda's Banner. Now, this is a tough decision to make. Now, this is not an equipment deck. This was mainly a choice as a way in which to find some protection for Jodah so that he doesn't get spot removed from the battlefield every time that we cast him. So Konda's Banner banner, although it does help out the overall legendary theme of this deck. I felt that it was important to slightly weaken that so that we can enhance the protection for Jodah, because Jodah is going to be our closing condition. Jodah is going to be one of the win conditions in this deck. He's going to come down and give the mass plus ability that allows us to win the game with combat. The absolute best that Khan's banner can do is +2/+2 to each one of our humans. And, well, if we can get this equipment onto Jodah, that's the absolute ceiling of this card. So although we're losing a legendary equipment that really has some great synergies to what we're doing in this deck, Swiftfoot Boots replacing it is going to help the deck more because it's going to do more to keep Jodah on the battlefield. All right, some more cards going in to help smooth out the deck. We have Unite the Coalition. This is going to be a 5-color staple. Just wait until it happens. It's only a matter of time. Instant speed, 2 in WUBRG colors. Pick any combination of the 5 following modes, and we can pick more than one if we so choose. Target permanent phases out. Target player draws a card. Exile target player's graveyard. 2 points of damage to any target, or destroy target artifact or enchantment. Those are all 5 insanely relevant abilities in our format, all stapled onto one card at instant speed for a mana value of 7, which at the surface may seem like a lot, but with the ability and the mana ramp and the mana rocks and how quickly everyone's trying to get their resources out there on the battlefield to cast all of their spells ahead of turn, it is very, very unlikely that you're going to wait till turn 7 to cast Unite the Coalition. That's coming in, and it's going to take the place of Utter End. We're going to lose one of our spot removal spells to make way for a spell that can do so much more. And let's face it, we're getting 5 things out of that 7 mana. Here we're getting 1 out of 4. And that's a little bit pricey for just a 1 exiling card, 1 exile effect. So it makes that transition a little easier. Speaking of transition easier, Akroma's Will is going into this deck. This was one of the cards from Commander Legends that when it came out, I felt the exact same way about Akroma's Will as I do about Unite the Coalition. At that time, that card was a mere pennies. If you look now, it's a lot of pennies. Akroma's Will is slowly creeping up because the community is starting to understand that this is a game-winning card at instant speed. If Jodah is on our side of the battlefield, which we're planning to have happen when we cast Akroma's Will, then each creature we control is going to gain Flying, Vigilance, Double Strike, Lifelink, Indestructible, and Protection from all colors until end of turn. Akroma's Will is an absolute game-ending card in a deck that is sculpted to win via combat. It's going in, and it's going to replace Cathar's Crusade. Don't get me wrong, I love Cathar's Crusade. Enchantment 3 and 2 white. Whenever a creature ETBs under our control, we put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. Is this a good card in this deck? Absolutely yes. Is this a better card than Akroma's Will in this deck? No, it is not. Cathar's Crusade is a much better card in a token deck, because with so many creatures coming into play, they can get so much bigger, so much more quickly. And let's face it, by shaving off 20% of the mana value from Cathar's Crusade to Akroma's Will, we're getting rid of something that can slowly build our army to something that can win the game for just 4 mana. All right, next card going in, and it's not something that we haven't seen recently. It's Esika, God of the Tree. It's one of these cards that has the 2 faces, and very, very rarely are we ever going to cast it for the Esika part. We already have enough mana fixing in the form of Relic of Legends and some of the other spells and effects in this deck, so we'll skip right over Esika for the real reason why we're putting this into the 99. It is the Prismatic Bridge, a legendary enchantment for WUBRG mana. At the beginning of our upkeep, we reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a creature or planeswalker card, and we put it onto the battlefield. So you already saw Dahada could come out. Any one of our other legendary humans could come out. There are a few other creatures in this build that are not legendary humans that help out and synergize with the human squad. But, either way, the Prismatic Bridge is going to help us populate our side of the battlefield with the creatures or planeswalker we need in order to win the game. So with Esika coming in and helping by getting creatures from our library onto the battlefield, coming out is going to be Realm Walker. Now, this was a shapeshifter with Changeling for 2 and a green mana. It's a 2/3 body. When it would come into play, we would pick humans, and then we would look at the top card of our library at any time, and we may cast creature spells of the chosen type from the top of our library. Well, here's the thing about Realm Walker. Even though this is a dedicated legendary human deck, the number of legendary humans in this build hover around 25%. So 25% of the time, Realm Walker's cast spells from the top of the library ability will help us out. I would rather replace Realm Walker with the Prismatic Bridge and know that at the beginning of every one of my turns, I'm going to get a creature. I'm going to get a legendary human creature or one of the supporting characters or Dahada right onto the battlefield for free. All right, just a few cards left. Next up, to help synergize and protect our legendary humans, Rhythm of the Wild is going in. Enchantment 1 in Gruul colors. Creature spells we control can't be countered. There's going to be no worse feeling than sinking 5 mana into Joda, the Unifier, paying attacks of 2, 4, or 6, only to have it countered by one of your opponents. So let's take that off the table by putting Rhythm of the Wild into the 99. And non-token creatures we control have Riot, which means they enter the battlefield with our choice of a +1/+1 counter or with haste. So with that going in, we're going to slightly weaken, and I'm really going to emphasize the slightly part here because the card that's going to replace was only in here to help synergize the legendary theme of this deck. Not so much because it was helping out the human squad, but just to kind of stay more on the legendary flavor. Now that we're having a little bit more of tunnel vision towards the legendary human end, taking out Predator Flagship seems like it makes a lot of sense. I mean, we are able to tap 5 and tap this to destroy target creature with flying, and we can pay 2 to give target creature flying until end of turn. Well, so for the initial investment of 5 mana and then 7 mana to destroy any creature in play, we've already invested 12 mana just to kill 1 creature. So you could see by getting rid of Predator Flagship and replacing it with Rhythm of the Wild, we're doing a much better job of synergizing the humanness of this build and not so much the legendary flavor. Next card up, and a lot of what we said with Rhythm of the Wild replacing Predator Flagship, we can also say about Patriarch's Bidding. Yes, this could help out our opponents, so we'll really need to make sure we keep an eye on their graveyards and whether or not they're playing with any kind of tribal decks. We don't want to cast a spell that's going to hurt us more than it helps. For the purposes of this legendary human tribal build, Patriarch's Bidding will bring every human back from our graveyard right to the battlefield. And if we're lucky enough to have Rhythm of the Wild on our side of the battlefield when that happens, well, we may end up winning the game. So we're taking a mass recursion sorcery speed spell and putting it into the 99 to replace Chainer, Nightmare Adept. This was a 3/2. It's 2 in Rakdos colors, so Patriarch's Bidding is going to cost 1 more overall mana than Chainer, but it does so much more for the scope of this build. For Chainer, we would need to discard a card, and then we could cast a creature spell from our graveyard this turn, but we can only activate that ability once each turn, and when that creature would come into play, it would have haste on its own. But again, we're only doing this once per turn, and it's an initial investment of 4 mana. It's not big enough for its investment. And additionally, Chainer doesn't help out the overall squad outside of its once-a-turn recursion, which means Patriarch's Bidding is going to work harder and do more for this deck than Chainer could. All right, a little bit of protection for the squad in our life total. 1 copy of Teferi's Protection. We all know what this fantastic white instant can do. Not having it in the deck prior to this Up and Up series installment, well, I don't have an answer for that. Well, actually, I do have an answer. It was more along the lines of availability. I mean, let's be honest, if you've got 35 copies of Teferi's Protection, you're most likely going to put one in every single commander deck that has white. I don't have that. maybe one day, many years from now, maybe that's a possibility. But for the moment, a copy became available. We're shoring up what we can do in this deck. So Teferi's Protection's going in, and coming out will be Hellvault. This, very similar to Predator Flagship, was included for its legendary flavor. Well, now that we're kind of pigeonholing our legendary flavor into legendary human synergy, we're going to take out the Hellvault for Teferi's Protection. All right, just a few more. We're going to swap in a new land. Going in is Plaza of Heroes. This is going to be an amazing addition for this type of build. It taps for a colorless mana. It taps for 1 mana of any color that we can use only to cast a legendary spell. This is a legendary deck. We can tap to add 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents we control. Again, this is a legendary deck. And even better than those first 3 abilities, we can pay 3, tap this, and exile Plaza of Heroes to give target legendary creature hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This is like a personalized heroic intervention that, let's face it, will most likely be targeted right at Jodah. The Plaza of Heroes is going in, and it's going to replace what can only be deemed as the weakest, how would we say this, creature-specific land in the deck, and that's going to be Unclaimed Territory. It taps for a colorless, or it taps for 1 mana of any color that can be used only to cast a spell of the chosen type. Of course, the chosen creature type would be humans when this ETBs. You can see that Plaza of Heroes is leaps and bounds better than Unclaimed Territory. All right, so the last 3 changes are going to be quick ones here, and the purpose of these last 3 changes are ways in which to help speed up the mana. How am I going to say this? The last three changes here are going to happen as a way in which to speed up our mana ramp, fix our mana more quickly, and more than anything else, this is going to help make the deck faster. Prior to this installment of the Up and Up series, I believe there were only 2. There were only 2 ways in which to speed up our mana ramp. I think there was a Soul Ring, and I think there was an Arcane Signet. And I mean, off the top of my head, I don't remember how many total there were after that. But we need to speed up the mana production so that we can maintain tempo throughout the early to mid game and then close it out shortly thereafter. So with that in mind, 1 copy each of 3 Visits, Nature's Lore, and Farseek are going to go into this deck. Why these 3 are going in? Well, let's face it, we're only investing 2 mana, and we get to pick any one of the cards that are in our deck that have basic land types, and I'm telling you right now, in the early game, every one of these spells should target a Triome. The Triome is going to come down. It's going to be tapped, yes, but it will tap for 1 of any 3 different colors, and each one of these 3 sorcery speed spells can can fetch 1 of those lands right to our side of the battlefield just for the investment of 1 and 1 green mana. So these 3 spells are going in, and coming out, which may seem counterintuitive to put land ramp in and then take land ramp out, but by a way in which to kind of thin out the lands in our deck, once we get past the mana ramping stages of the early to mid game, we're drawing more spells in our opponents because we're taking out a few less lands, which we don't need 39 lands in this deck. This is not a big mana deck. We don't have tons and tons of high costing spells that are floating around in the 99 of this build. You look at some of the ones we've taken out already versus a lot of the ones that are going in, and you can see that we've skewed the overall CMC of this deck lower than it was before these updates. So coming out, we're going to take out a Reliquary Tower. We do have some mass draw spells in this deck, but let's face it, we don't need something like Reliquary Tower if we're not specifically crafting a big mana build that's going to put dozens and dozens of cards in our hand. And let's face it, 1 less card that gives us colorless mana means that's just 1 more land that gives us colored mana. With that in mind, Reliquary Tower is, in addition to that coming out, we're also going to bring out Command Beacon. Now, with Bard class going in, that's going to help mitigate the cost of Joda coming out of the command zone. And plus, there's also Urza's Incubator in the 99 of this build as well, which also will reduce human spells that we cast by 2, which, let's face it, that could help with the commander tax with Joda outside of the command zone. So it makes sense that we can bring out Command Beacon to bring in one of these sorcery speed land fetching spells that can help us to ramp out in the early game. And lastly, Mana Confluence is going to come out. Now, with Plaza of Heroes going in, it's just another land that should be able to act as another form of command tower, or a reflecting pool, or an exotic orchard. And plus, with the number of shock lands and fetch lands we have in the 99 of this build, any kind of ways that we can help shore up life loss, which, let's face it, we have to tap Mana Confluence in order to get mana, and each time we do, we have to pay 1 life when we do so. So as a way in which to help with the overall loss of life because of having 10 shocks and 10 fetches, taking out Mana Confluence should not affect the overall land base of this build. Whew, all right, there you have it. Boy, did we turn over a chunk of this deck, including the general. Let me know your thoughts about these changes in the comments section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.